Saint Augustine on the Harmony of the Gospels, Book 1, Chapter 11. In opposition to those who foolishly imagine that Christ converted the people to himself by magical arts. Moreover, let those who madly fancy that it was by the use of magical arts that he was able to do the great things which he did, and that it was by the practice of such rites that he made his name a sacred thing to the peoples who were to be converted to him, give their attention to this question, namely, whether by the exercise of magical arts, and before he was born on this earth, he could also have filled with the Holy Spirit those mighty prophets who aforetime declared those very things concerning him as things destined to come to pass, which we can now read in the accomplishment in the Gospel, and which we can see in their present realization in the world. For surely, even if it was by magical arts that he secured worship for himself, and that too after his death, it is not the case that he was a magician before he was born. Nay, for the office of prophesying on the subject of his coming, one nation had been most specially deputed, and the entire administration of that commonwealth was ordained to be a prophecy of this king who was to come and who was to found a heavenly state drawn out of all nations. Chapter 12. On the fact that the God of the Jews, after the subjugation of that people, was still not accepted by the Romans, because his commandment was that he alone should be worshipped and images destroyed. Furthermore, that Hebrew nation, which, as I have said, was commissioned to prophesy of Christ, had no other God but one God, the true God, who made heaven and earth, and all that therein is. Under his displeasure they were ofttimes given into the power of their enemies. And now indeed, on account of their most heinous sin in putting Christ to death, they have been thoroughly rooted out of Jerusalem itself, which was the capital of their kingdom, and have been made subject to the Roman Empire. Now the Romans were in the habit of propitiating the deities of those nations whom they conquered by worshipping these themselves, and they were accustomed to undertake the charge of their sacred rites. But they declined to act on that principle with regard to the God of the Hebrew nation, either when they made their attack or when they reduced the people. I believe that they perceived that, if they admitted the worship of this deity, whose commandment was that he only should be worshipped, and that images should be destroyed, they would have to put away from them all those objects to which formerly they had undertaken to do religious service, and by the worship of which they believed their empire had grown. But in this, the falseness of their demons mightily deceived them. For surely they ought to have apprehended the fact that it is only by the hidden will of the true God, in whose hand resides the supreme power in all things, that the kingdom was given them and has been made to increase, and that their position was not due to the favor of those deities who, if they could have wielded any influence whatever in that matter, would rather have protected their own people from being overmastered by the Romans, or would have brought the Romans themselves into complete subjection to them. Certainly, they cannot possibly affirm that the kind of piety and manners exemplified by them became objects of love and choice on the part of the gods of the nations which they conquered. They will never make such an assertion if they only recall their own early beginnings, the asylum for abandoned criminals and the fratricide of Romulus. For when Remus and Romulus established their asylum with the intention that whoever took refuge there, be the crime what it might be with which he stood charged, should enjoy impunity in his deed, they did not promulgate any precepts of penitence for bringing the minds of such wretched men back to a right condition. By this bribe of impunity, did they not rather arm the gathered band of fearful fugitives against the states to which they properly belonged and the laws of which they dreaded? Or, when Romulus slew his brother, who had perpetrated no evil against him, is it the case that his mind was bent on the vindication of justice and not on the acquisition of absolute power? And is it true that the deities did take their delight in manners like these, as if they were themselves enemies to their own states, in so far as they favored those who were the enemies of these communities? Nay, rather, neither did they by deserting them harm the one class, nor did they, by passing over to their side in any sense, help the other. For they have it not in their power to give kingship or to remove it. But that is done by the one true God according to his hidden counsel. And it is not his mind to make those necessarily blessed to whom he may have given an earthly kingdom, or to make those necessarily unhappy whom he has deprived of that position. But he makes men blessed or wretched for other reasons, by other means, and either by permission or by actual gift distributes temporal and earthly kingdoms to whomsoever he pleases, and for whatsoever period he chooses, according to the foreordained order of the ages.